It's now my pleasure to introduce you to the thematic panel 3, Research and Innovation at the Forefront of Countering Crime and Terrorism and Securing the Society. For this purpose, I'm kindly asking the moderator and the panelists to join me on stage. So the moderator is Caroline Davey, series experts. Speakers, we have Anna Sutcliffe, PT National Innovation Agency, Greg Mournier, Head of Europol Innovation Lab, and Wenke Meding, Swedish Police.
Thank you very much. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this panel on research and innovation at the forefront of countering crime and terrorism and securing society. I'm Caroline Davey, Professor at the University of Salford in the UK and Director of the Design Against Crime Solution Centre, and I'll be your moderator for our discussions today. So this is a subject that I'm passionate about, not least because through projects like Cutting Crime Impact and now Engaged to Innovate, I've seen firsthand both the potential and the pitfalls of European security research and innovation. Too often, security and R&I projects rush to develop new tools and solutions before fully understanding the problems they're seeking to address. And too often, innovation is only equated with development and commercial uptake of technology, whereas in fact, valuable solutions might take many forms. Fundamentally, however, they must meet end users' needs and operational context in order to be considered useful, and too often they don't. So I'll be encouraging our panel to interrogate the assumptions that underpin security R&I and to explore how we can build a more human-centered, problem-driven and implementation-ready R&I ecosystem. For this reason, I'm delighted that we have a panel today that is closely connected to end users, particularly law enforcement. At the end of the day, end users need security solutions that can truly work in practice and deliver positive impact for European communities. I'm looking forward to a lively and thoughtful discussion, and I would be very pleased to take some questions towards the end of the session from those of you in the audience. So please do ask questions using the Slido. But before I dive into the discussion, I'd like first to invite our panelists to briefly introduce themselves to the audience. To keep things moving, could I ask that each of you say a little bit about yourselves and also indicate the types of end users that you work with? Wenke, can I start with you?
Thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Wenke Medin. I work as an expert in the Swedish National Police in the National Operations Department, who is responsible for all national and international operations in Sweden. But today I'm also here in a different role as the chair of the European Clearing Board, the EUCB, which is a permanent structure created by the Europol head of national units. And it consists of innovation and tech experts from all EU countries and also the Schengen associate countries. And we meet regularly to discuss the prioritized capabilities of law enforcement. We cooperate in core and strategic groups to develop the capabilities needed by law enforcement. And we do this to create synergies with law enforcement in Europe and also to avoid the duplication of work.
Thank you. I move to Gregory.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Greg Mournier. I'm working for Europol. This is the European Police Agency. My colleague yesterday explained a bit how we work. We basically support for the last 20 years, 25 years, cross-border criminal investigations. So we have a lot of analysts and people working on cases to support colleagues from Venke, colleagues from Yarmo, from different countries to work on criminal cases. I'm leading the Europol Innovation Lab, which is a dedicated entity to try to help the member states to make the most of new technologies and innovations. So we have different missions. The first one is really to coordinate all the research and innovation activities of Europol as an agency. We have a lot of very bright people doing investigations, using new technologies, new methods to make progress in their investigations. They are engaged in research, and so the idea of the executive director was really to centralize all the expertise in terms of research funding, networks and engagement with academia, working with the Horizon Europe community, the CERIS community in one central place. We also do foresight, so I have a team that does technology monitoring, scenario planning, innovation design. I know this is something close to your heart, and we can maybe come back to it. I have also a team that does engaging with the academic community, the industry world as well. We organized every year the Europol Innovation and Industry Days, where we showcase some of the best products for law enforcement. And then the most important is really the technical team. We have engineers, developers, pen testers, investigators that are testing, prototyping new tech. Hopefully they are also engaging with some of the Horizon Europe project, taking some of the prototypes and the end result of those projects to test them on real operation data sets. For that, we have a sandbox. We work with different scientists to try to really improve and test and validate some of your prototypes. We also are a platform really to bring together the best of what the law enforcement communities in the different member states are coming up with themselves. So they're also building tools, and sometimes they want to share them. So we created what we call the Europol Tool Repository. We have now more than 40 tools that are developed either by national law enforcement agencies, by the Europol Innovation Lab, sometimes also given by you, the community, academic world. We test them, and then we give access to them for free to the law enforcement community so that they can use it on investigation, that they can experiment with it. So that's a little bit the different missions of the Innovation Lab. And just a final word on the role of Europol as an agency when it comes to the Horizon Europe. We work very closely with colleagues from DG Home. We try to use our foresight capability and our network to identify some research themes. So every year we make a contribution to our colleagues to DG Home to develop the work program for Horizon Europe. We also sometimes take part into the selection of some of your projects. And then, and that's the most important part, we try to engage actively with some of the most relevant projects that fall into our mandate to give advice, to attend a demo, to test some of your prototypes, to make sure that the end users that we are really plugged into via the UCB, Venke, and the rest of the community can provide you with feedback so that you are on the right track in your research. So that's a little bit the introductions of what the Innovation Lab does. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anna.
Hi, thank you for having me here and for inviting me. My name's Anna Sutcliffe. I come from the National Innovation Agency in Portugal, ANI, where we work under two different ministries, the Ministry for Science and the Ministry for the Economy. So basically the idea is that we make the jump between fundamental research and innovation. That's where we situate ourselves. And within them, I accompany Horizon Europe Cluster 3 in two capacities as the national delegate. So I sit in the program committee, and where we help develop the work programs along with Europol as well as one of the advisors, and also as the national contact point, where I have a more direct relationship with our end users, our stakeholders, not just the end users, but also the academy, industry, and small, medium enterprises. Basically, the idea is that I know what we're doing at a national level, encourage these people to apply to Horizon Europe, show them what it is that they have available to them in terms of funding and different opportunities, not limited obviously to Cluster 3, but to others. Sometimes we don't see opportunities directly as an innovator, but we can help you open up that landscape. And basically that's what I do. I just try to know what's going on in both sides of the world and put everything together.
Thank you very much. So, to open up the discussion, then I'd turn first to Venka. In European security circles, when people talk about innovation, they often mean technology. The terms are seen as synonymous. But of course, technology, innovation, when we're talking about innovation, it can actually take many different forms. How are the Swedish police moving beyond this technology-centric mindset and approaching innovation as a broader capability issue? And what lessons do you think others might learn from this?
Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about this. And I find it very interesting, the question, because tech is, of course, the enabler for very much of what we do, and the services being done from many Horizon projects and from the lab are crucial for us. But I find the concept of innovation quite interesting, because you find as many interpretations as you find people working with it. And I think one of the interpretations is innovation is needed to stay relevant. And also it's a mindset question on how to meet every situation, but how can we make this better? How can we create value? So it requires a mindset change of a very open mind. In Sweden, as many of you know, we've had a very intensive fight against organized crime, and we still do. The level of crime is very serious, and the criminal networks are seriously affecting our society through attacks on our institutions, on vulnerable individuals. And we see that as a democracy question, that we need to tackle this in a very different way than we have before. And the crime is, as you know, changing constantly. It is not, they are super innovative and creative, so not working with innovation is not an option. So we had also this perspective that with the right tools, we're there. But then we saw that we need to think broader. So we started thinking more in capabilities, and capabilities is tech, capabilities is competence, structures, hierarchy, attitudes, culture, and so on. And so then we, in the Swedish police, decided that we have to throw away the old ways of working. We have to create cross-functional teams working from a problem. What is the problem that we're meeting? What are we actually looking at? And so we used a lot of design thinking methodology to identify the different problems that we were facing. And then we saw that the hierarchies doesn't really do us very good. So we had to throw those aboard when we can. And we started inviting different cross-cultural, cross-functional teams with social services, schools, and other societal actors that can help us. And what we started with then was, okay, we just have to test our way. It's a very complex issue. We do not know what the right solution is. So we started testing with ways of working, with data, how we share data, our systems, our tech, who does what. And it was also very important in this way, so it's create a culture where testing and failing fast was a possibility and also a necessity. And what we saw when we started working like this, working with innovation, but in all aspects of our operations, suddenly we reached results that we hadn't done. We were able to tackle crime and hit them where it hurt the most. And it's been very invigorating to see these results. So now actually it is implemented as the new operational model for the whole Swedish police. But this has required continuous involvement of all levels of the organization. We are very much in contact with the operational staff continuously because they know what we're seeing, they know what the problem is, and they know what tools they need to attack this problem. So it's really innovation in all aspects, with tech, of course, important, but all the other tools as well. So I think the mindset of how do we stay relevant, how do we attack the problem correctly, and what can others learn? I mean, thinking out of the box and daring to see it from a holistic perspective.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that insight. So, Gregory, if I can turn to you next. Given Europol's cross-border mission and role in addressing cybercrime, it's no surprise that much of the innovation you're involved in is actually highly technology-driven. But I know that there's growing interest at Europol in broader approaches, including human-centered design. So could you perhaps tell us a little about how Europol's approach to innovation is evolving and why?
Yeah, that's a very good question. First of all, we're not only doing cybercrime, we're doing many other types of, supporting many investigations in many different types of crime, including counterterrorism and others. These are really fields where technology is a bias, and investigators like tools, they like to play with things, so that's why we have this really technical bias. But it's true that gradually over the years, we've learned to open up to new methods, and in particular innovation design. I think the success stories, I think we can call it the success stories in Sweden, of adopting these new methods of thinking, using innovation design to design new crime-fighting strategies at national and local level, was so successful that at the end, we are collaborating very closely with the Swedish police. They have sent us an expert in innovation design who was really instrumental in designing this new technology, this new methodology. We have also, about 2 years ago, hired an innovation design specialist. So we're beefing up the team of innovation design, trying to adopt the methodology. And I think it's really important in 3 aspects from my perspective. Now with 2 years of historical perspective. First of all, innovation design specialists are really good at putting the user at the center of the experience and the design process. We've been working a lot with engineers, developers, technologists, but they do have a different approach. They tend to identify innovation potential that technologists won't see because they put the users really at the center. They have a full methodology to engage, to gather the requirement, obviously, but go a little bit beyond. Putting this human factor is really making us develop not only technologically advanced tools, but also more effective tools. So that's the first reason. I think they're also very good innovation design specialists to take the context into consideration. So they will find areas to develop the tools in a certain way that will make it more efficient. To give you an example, we've launched 2 pilots with university students, master students in innovation design. We gave them brief and task. For instance, please work for the next 6 months on a new AI tool interface for law enforcement, and they really bring a fresh perspective on how the tools was developed. And for instance, they've highlighted new features such as embedding explainable AI functions. So if you're an investigator, you're working with a platform, getting information processed partly by AI, for instance, you would have a transparency labeling system that will tell you this piece of investigations or information has been reviewed by an investigator, this one hasn't, and many other things. I mean, I'm not doing justice to their project, but just to give you a concrete example of how innovation design people that are not necessarily technicians can really bring a great added value to the innovation process. And I think a third reason why I see a really great added value of involving these innovation design specialists is that they are good at prototyping really quickly. In fact, my experience is that they are quite ruthless in assessing whether a project is worth continuing or not, compared to a researcher who might just go at it and continue look at it from different perspectives. They do a quick prototype, they engage with stakeholders, and no, Gregory, this one we can just park it and focus on something else. And I think that really brought a new dynamic in the lab, and I think we will continue to engage with those people. They really bring a great added value, and again, I'm really grateful for the Swedish police to have also sent a second international expert that is still working with us. And it's kind of an Europeanization of the success of Sweden. And I hope that having this experience within Europol, sharing it, disseminating it with the other member states, 27, but also the Schengen associated country, will contribute to this innovation community to adopt different methods.
Thank you very much, and I'm particularly interested to hear about the quick and early prototyping as a way of getting feedback on ideas, much better than going forward with a project and developing something that isn't useful for people. So Anna, you've heard from both Venko and Gregory about the importance of going beyond technology alone and the need to build broader capabilities and partnerships in security innovation. From your perspective, and considering your work with Portugal's innovation ecosystem, do those issues resonate? Are they things you hear from your contacts in research and in business?
Yes, actually, yeah, this resonates a lot because innovation isn't just about technology, as we've said. It's also about new ways of looking at the problem and solving that problem in a very new way. And for this, and in my perspective, you need the contributions from different type of people, different types of background, who will necessarily look at the problem in a very different way. And that is actually how a Horizon project should be built up. And in Cluster 3 especially, those different type of backgrounds should be integrated into a proposal. So I actually came across a really good example of this, was a small medium enterprise that we have in Portugal based in social sciences and humanities, so they're very much into the human side of things. They were brought into the project just to help with how the technology could be uptaken by the users, but what actually ended up happening was that they were looking at the users as humans and not somebody that will just play with a tool or a toy. And so this was for a crisis response teams, and instead of just looking at the tools and how it was used, they were looking at how exhausted those teams were, how quickly the turnover for those teams was happening, and how burnout was a huge issue for those teams. And they were coming up with solutions for that problem that was, I mean, it goes hand in hand with using the tools, but it is a huge problem that was previously overlooked by the project because it was so technology-centered. So this is just a short and fast example, and hopefully I'm not, tearing apart the project, but the idea is that if you do put different people with their different perspectives, you do get something completely new and a solution that will impact way more than just if you're talking about technology and how it's used and uptake. And I mean, both are very necessary.
Thank you very much. So a lot there about design and the insight that it can offer then. So thank you. So one issue I'd like to learn from this panel. The Commission is concerned that many R&I practical outputs fail to be taken up or make an impact in practice. You're all in close contact with security end users. Why do you think this happens, and what might we do differently to support increased uptake? And can I start with you, Gregory?
Thank you. That's a big question. First, caveat, I've only been involved in this community Horizon Europe and research for the last 5 years, so my perception might be slightly narrow. I don't know everything, but I think I also have a little bit of perspective to draw some conclusion. The first thing I would say is that I've seen and I've witnessed an improvement in the community towards innovation uptake. In our discussions with colleagues in the Commission, colleagues in the RTOs, academia, all those who are contributing to this project, there is now, I feel, a real objective at the end to produce something meaningful for the community, a conscious that this is public money being invested and that there is really a requirement to deliver something meaningful. I've discussed with colleagues at the Boost on the Booster initiative, for instance. I think this is an excellent initiative. There are also companies in this audience that are helping the project to deliver more concrete and tangible results. So this is all going in the right directions. I don't want to talk too much about the end users because I think Venke will probably talk about it. But a few things that could potentially be considered to improve the uptake and cross the valley of death, as some of you have coined. First of all, I think we should be more honest and transparent about the fact that not every single Horizon Europe funded project should be successful. What does successful mean in this environment? We've been talking about the fact that when you do innovations, you also should fail sometimes. And maybe it is acceptable that at some point in the project's life cycle, the consortia come to the conclusion that, no, actually, the objective we set ourselves and then we put in the proposals are not achievable. But we're going to spend the rest of the project to draw lessons and try to engage and explain why this technology might not be working or why the objectives were actually realistic. I think this should be part of the success as a project. Again, maybe this is one of the criteria that is being used to assess the project, but from my perspective, maybe not. But I think this is something we could do. I think we also need to beef up a little bit the technical capabilities of those who are assessing the result of the project to make sure that they really understand and that we change again the narrative around, it's not because I've finalized my report, sent it to RIA and DG Home, everything's fine, across all the boxes, my project is fine. No, I think we should really have a hard look at whether this is actually successful or not, why it was successful or not. So this is really an aspect that we could improve. Another thing is maybe considering ring-fencing part of the money available in Horizon Europe Cluster 3 for uptake. Really, I mean, this is already done in some aspect, but you could have a number of projects that are dedicated to uptake some result of former projects. Oftentimes, again, this is an ongoing criticism, the fact that some projects are just delivering prototypes that are not mature enough, that the community of investigators and analysts cannot use, and therefore they're being put on the shelf, or then they're just recycled for other projects, which is not bad in itself. It just means that a project needs more time. And that could also be a new category of Horizon project. This is the follow-up of another project. I know it does happen sometimes, but I think it should be even more embedded into the system. I think also, from our perspective, my advice to the consortia would be generous. Share your prototype with the end users. Share the prototype with Europol. We have the facilities to test your solutions on operational information. We can give you feedback. We can help you to improve. We understand that there need to be a commercial pathway. You want to commercialize and monetize your product. It's great. But if you work with us and if you're generous, if you share the source code, maybe that might sound a bit unrealistic, but still, with us, we will be able to provide you nice feedback so that your product will be even better and will sell even better later on the market. I think this is really important. And last but not least, we've heard a lot, and we always hear a lot about the fact that innovation procurement, pre-commercial procurement, the entire policy framework and legal framework is there, but it's not being used. That's also something we should really make an effort to really try to, in practice, implement all the tools we have to help you commercialize, to help you financially to develop and do the last mile development of your tools. I'm in favor of us, the end user, to use this policy framework, to commit to maybe buy the first 100 licenses of your beta versions of your brand new tool, although it might not be super mature. But again, it gives you a commercial pathway, it gives you an horizon where you know you will be starting to prime the pump to sell your product, and maybe later on you will do version 2, 3, 4, and then you will be able to sell it maybe outside Europe or in Europe. So these are 4 of them, the advice I would give to the community to improve the innovation uptake.
Thank you very much. I'll move next to Anna and ask you to talk about uptake of practical outputs from security R&I projects.
Yeah, that was really interesting. We, as a national contact point and delegate, I have a slightly different perspective. So we look at projects and at different TRL level of development. So obviously those that are disruptive, then yes, I completely agree that the mindset of failing, it should be there, and it's something that's coming up, and if it fails, why did it fail? What can we learn? Super important, no doubt. When we're looking at slightly higher TRL, so the innovation actions, again, Gregory talked about the problem of how the last mile to market, to the uptake of the end users. That is, again, a huge problem. And it is something that we see a lot, and it's just not just in Cluster 3, it's all over. How can we use the money from EIC, for example, get them to make something a little bit more focused on security and push that last mile towards the market, and make sure that Europol, the police, disaster resilience efforts are using these tools, and they're actively engaged. But then we're looking at the police forces themselves or during a project and how well they are influencing that project. And then again, that is a huge thing. I don't want to step on your input here, but what we've seen at a national level is that the innovation mentality has to exist. And if it doesn't exist, you get people participating just for the money without really understanding that they need to also get the output of that project, and that output has to be needed and used and uptaken by that force. So there's a lot of different aspects that have to be considered. And again, the maturity that comes with participation, that comes with understanding, is essential to make sure that uptake is indeed happening at the end of a project. And has to be a part of the mentality of the whole institution, both top down and bottom up, so that there has to be there pushing innovation forwards in its various aspects.
And are you seeing, Anna, changes in attitudes? Are you seeing end user organisations saying, I'm only going to get involved if I'm going to get something out of it?
Yeah, without a doubt. We have a shining example in Portugal. Our police, our judiciary police, who were actually here yesterday, they've built an innovation lab. They're making sure that the projects that they participate in are aligned with their own objectives. They know where they need the new tools and objects and toys, as they call it. And they've also built a platform that informs the operatives what is available, what they can use, and what's coming up. And that top-down communication has to exist within an organization. But it all comes down to having a person there that is capable of implementing that solution. So what happens a lot, and we've seen this, is that sometimes the positions aren't there for a long time. You get somebody who's there for four years, and they have no idea what they're talking about in the beginning, but by the end of the 4 years they do. But then they're lost, and that information and that knowledge is lost, and it hasn't been implemented within the organization. So there's lots I could talk about, but basically that's it, yes.
Fantastic. I'll move to Venka. What would you like to add on this topic?
I think that my colleague has said much of the relevant stuff, but I think that in law enforcement, many times we find that the projects are taking too long. And one of the key elements and one of the things that I think that the EUCB can contribute to is that we need to define what is actually the problem. What is this solution going to solve? And I think that many times we skip this part and we start developing something, and also with the tech development that is so fast, developments that we thought would take 2 years, take 6 weeks. So we cannot start with something, think that it'll be relevant in 4 years. We need to make sure that we evaluate what is actually being produced and what kind of use it will do continuously. And in this, it is critical that we keep the end users informed and that they are actively participating. And I think that we also have strategic priorities that can, with a longer time span. And here we see that the horizons can fill an important function as well. But I think that we need both. We need the fast track and we need the long-term parting, but we also need to make sure that we can use the products. Many times we participate in projects when it's actually finished. We cannot use what has been developed, and we don't have the means to buy it. So I think some of the suggestions that Greg made now about how we could do it in a better way so that law enforcement actually gets to use it, and maybe that we could continue developing it within the frameworks that we have developed would be very valuable.
Thank you, which takes me very nicely on to my next question. So too often we see projects rushing forward towards solutions before fully understanding the problems they're trying to address. And I'll start with you, Anna. From your perspective, what happens when we get the problem framing right, and why does this so often get overlooked?
Well, so when you get to the problem framing right, it means basically that you've involved the end user, you've involved all the different aspects from all the different backgrounds, looking at that problem in an innovative way. And you've understood what it is that the end user needs and what they can or cannot use. And the cannot use is very important as well. It's not just what they can use. So you have integrated from the beginning not the idea of an SME or the want of a large company or this really great disruptive idea that comes from research but has very little application. You've put them all together. And these people, when they're working together, really do create highly impactful projects, as we saw yesterday in those in the awards that were given. That those impacts go beyond the project life, and you created something that continues forward and is able to finance itself as it goes forward. So for me, that's the huge and major success behind those projects, is the fact that everybody was listened to from the idea, the conception of the project, to its development as a proposal, and to the actual project itself as it moves along. And making sure that end users, and that's a plural, are using it, and with the perspective of it's a European problem, it's addressing European priorities. It has to be a European vision. You can't be stuck in your own little sandbox. You have to make sure that everybody is contributing, and that together, I know this sounds corny, but you are stronger together. And that helps. The capacity to communicate is really hard when you're stuck in your own little bubble. But it is super important when you're building a project like this.
Thank you. Venka, I'll move to you if there's anything you'd like to add.
I think that she's raising very relevant questions, but I also think that in many of these things we do not dare to look at the whole capability. What are the needs for capability? We look at the technical aspect, but sometimes we forget to, for example, look at the capability and competence. I mean, for some products and services that are developed, maybe there is not resources in the member countries to have enough people that can actually use the tools, and how can we work on this in the implementation phase to make it easier for the member states to actually get the right tools to make it effective in operations. And yeah, I think we have to have a broader perspective on what a capability is and what a tech capability that's being developed needs in order to give the effect. So we have a lesson to do there.
Thank you. Something that should be explored along with the problem, obviously, is the capability of those that are dealing with the problems. So I'll move then to Gregory. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
In addition to what Anna and Venke have said, again, I don't have a very extensive experience in building proposals. I've been involved in the past in a few projects, but now our role has changed slightly. But I felt that when we were building proposals, the end user position and views was well represented. I remember at least for 2 projects, the gaps and needs had been analyzed beforehand, either with other projects or national initiatives. They were expressed into the proposals. The RTOs and the technical partners try to make proposals that would address these challenges. So, from a methodological perspective, I think it was okay. Of course, if you were to go deeper into the innovation design methodology, you would spend probably more time engaging with the end users. But again, we all know that we have a deadline. Often it's just at the end of the summer, and you really need to, scramble to find all the partners and divide, deliverables, etc. So there are a number of constraints, of course, that are inherent to building a proposal. So I don't, criticize that. But I think that it would be good to inject maybe those new methodology based on innovation design to make sure that end users are more taken into consideration. There's also the aspect of recycling existing technology prototypes that have been shelved and really trying to match the end users with existing prototype. And at the end, on paper it looks good, but partners know deep inside that this is not really, a good fit. And maybe also reducing the amount of money. I know that this is an ongoing discussion, but from my perspective, if you really want to serve the end users for especially short-term needs, having 5-year research project with multi-million euros, more than 50 partners is maybe not the right approach in terms of innovation uptake and the rest. It might serve a specific purpose in terms of fundamental research, but I think it's more manageable to have shorter projects with smaller budgets, less partners, where the end users are less diluted into the consortium as well, because if you have a 50 members consortia and you have maybe 5 or 6 LEAs, they have their daily job, it's not the same. So I think maybe thinking about reducing the budget, reducing the length of the project might improve the adoptions at the end and deliverables of concrete and tangible results. But again, it's not applying, there are maybe other scenarios which requires longer project and bigger budget. But I think we shouldn't be afraid of reducing the size of the project to really target specific end user needs.
Thank you. And I think reviewers should perhaps also be looking at projects, and if they see there's not enough time in the front end of the project to actually fully understand end user needs and operational context, then that shouldn't be the type of project that they're funding. Okay, I've got one more question, but before I ask that question, I just invite those that would like to pose a question using Slido to please do that, and then I will review those questions and have a look at them. Okay, so my next question is, might you be able to share examples where a security R&I project has helped an end user organization strengthen its practice, its capability, or improve its service to the public? And Venka, I'll start with you.
That was a good catch. I would like to be a bit untraditional here and answer one thing that is actually not a Horizon project, but I think we have a lot to learn from the establishment of the Europol Innovation Lab and how the Innovation Lab has worked extremely closely with end users from the very beginning, which has really made sure that the tools and what has been developed is actually used in operations on a daily basis. And another example, I think, is Starlight. They are developing AI solution of different kinds where, they have a budget of 17 million euros, so it's quite a lot of money. But we see there that some of the tools that are being developed will be of help for us in our operations. So we think this is important, and it also has a good involvement of end users. And I would also like to mention ENACT, which is also run by the Portuguese. And this is a Horizon project that actually works on making information available and update us on current events. And we can order them, according to our own needs regularly, which makes it very up to date. And we can use it in the way that we need constantly. And I think that's a good way of working as well. So it's not that the product is at the, at 3 years, but it's a continuous process of developing the project. So those are some examples.
I'll move to Gregory.
So there are many projects which have delivered some concrete results. I would start with 4Mobile, for instance. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. It's one of the first projects financed by Horizon Europe that generated an interesting MVP that we were able to put on what we call the Europol tool repository, one of the first tools, and now it's being used by the law enforcement community in Europe to do forensic investigations. So that's really an interesting project. Inspector as well. I remember, I think it's 3 or 4 years ago now, even the French Gendarmerie worked with the consortium to develop one of the first AI tools to work in a multilingual capacity. It does translations in 90 different languages. Now I think that the accuracy and the performance of the tools have been overtaken by new LLMs, but at the time it was really groundbreaking, and it was again our first translation tools for law enforcement, processing a lot of investigation and information in investigations in different languages, and that's also in our tool repository. So that's Inspector, very good. Other projects that I want to highlight, for instance, not delivering specific tools, but more methodology is, I'm thinking about iProcureNet, for instance, that really did a lot of work into the different methods of procuring innovative tools. They have a nice library of best practices, and we are, now the project is finished, but we are at the lab really interested to get their expertise and disseminate it and really use the work they've done to improve the use by our community of innovation procurement. I'm thinking also about Nature as well, that delivered a really interesting tools for the fight against illicit trafficking of cultural arts. Starlights, obviously, although I think Starlight was too big and is too big, 5 years, 19 million, that was too much, especially if now we're getting at the end, and the feedback I get from the technical team who's engage on a daily basis is that maybe the outcome compared to what was invested is fairly small, but it's still a good project. So there are many projects ahead, and ENACT, of course, and many others that, it's not because you're not mentioned that you haven't delivered properly. So I think it's important to say that this is, Horizon Europe is a successful program. It's really a powerful tools that the European Union is putting at the service of the member states to do research in the field of security and many other fields. And I think we should be proud of it. Of course, it's such a big program that there are many ways of improving it on the long term, but I think, I feel really privileged to be able to be part of the community and to have access to these research funds and this great community of researchers. So yes, it is very successful, and there are ways to improve it.
Thank you. Are there any success stories that you'd like to share, Anna?
You're putting me in a bit of an awkward position because I represent all Portuguese, and so I'm not going to mention any specific one. I know several are here, and they are amazing, and we are a tiny country. And the fact that we are so well performing really shows how well and how innovative all of our different stakeholders are, and the way that they look at this program is so good. What I will talk about is sometimes the difficulty that they have once the project is finished to ensuring that it continues, that it doesn't stop there. And this is something that Gregory touched upon about the cycle of innovation and how you can bring it forward. And this has to be a little bit thought of. And many member states have their own security funding, but many don't. And this is something that has to change, and especially in the field of security, maybe the Commission can help with that push for the other countries to realize how important it is. Maybe the future work program, FP10, will have a little bit more money for security, and we can start thinking about these things in a more geographically relevant way. And the thing is, there are excellent ideas, there are excellent police forces, there are excellent ways of bringing people together, and Horizon Europe is an excellent example of that. So I would really love to see the future bringing it even more together, making sure that these projects and these excellent ideas don't just stop at the end of the project, and that the police forces and end users, and I know we're talking about police forces a lot, but it's not just them, continue to use the project outputs and continue to bring in this idea of what innovation really is.
Thank you. So we've talked a lot about R&I projects, but we're also talking about the wider ecosystem. And so what needs to be done to make sure that projects are actually successful. So I think that's been a very interesting insight into some of the issues that we need to address. So I'm very pleased to move over to some of our questions. And I'd like to start with the first one on the list, which talks about the ingenuity of criminals evolves at pace. How can research and innovation transition from a reactionary position to a proactive position to address this? Who would like to start with that? Wenke, thank you.
I think that is the situation that we have been in the Swedish police constantly now for the last years. And therefore, I think that in order to take a proactive stance, we have to make sure all the time that the needs of law enforcement and the problems that we identify is constantly fed in back to the system. And that there are also fast-track innovation paces that we can use, so that the end result can also be delivered quite fast. And I think this will be this exchange, constant exchange and constant development is very much needed.
Thank you. Does anyone want to add anything to that? Gregory.
Yeah, I think investing more in foresight, scenario planning, envisaging the future, even in a very, sci-fi type of way, is helpful. You get to scenarios that might absolutely not take place, but some scenarios will be used, will happen. Criminals are very good at adopting technologies, misusing technologies, and that's what we're trying to do at the lab. We're really trying to beef up the foresight and tech monitoring team. We are engaged in a very good collaboration with the JRC, who's also very strong into foresight, and the Commission. We've established a strategy group of foresight experts from the 27 law enforcement agencies. Not every national law enforcement agency has a foresight team, but a lot of them have. They're sharing methodologies, they're sharing scenarios, and all this anticipation of how criminals might be using technology or how modus operandi might be changing is absolutely key in order to inform the work program of the future Horizon Europe course. And I think my perspective is that oftentimes senior managers, line managers, big shots say, oh yeah, it's good to have foresight, but they don't really take it into consideration into their strategic planning of their agencies, of their forces. And I think we should really bridge that gap. And I'm really lobbying internally within Europol to take more into consideration the result of our foresight work for the strategic managers, having meetings regularly, read our reports, and use that when you plan for the next operations, when you plan for the next research project, etc. So I would say really investing more into innovation design so that the end users is represented, but also foresight so that you keep looking ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to move to a next question, which I feel is very much related to that, which is, does the structure of Horizon Europe applications and evaluations make it harder for projects to be exploratory and to adapt to user needs they discover?
Okay, that one looks like it's for me. The idea is it shouldn't be. But yeah, I understand when you're looking at Horizon Europe, you're looking at a beast, really. It's huge. And when you're looking at it for the first time, you do need your help. There are lots of people around, national contact points to start with, to help you do that. But the idea that communication is the key here, that you need to listen and be able to talk to the end users. Sometimes it's hard for academia to do that, but then again, use your national contact points to get in touch with them, because they will help. And to be able to have a frank discussion. And what you do see is that end users are even more and more interested in looking at how they can solve their problems, and interested in how they can show their problems and then get more feedback on that. So projects do need to be exploratory, and they need to bring it to, they need to be able to put forward a solution that's completely disruptive. Cluster 3 was really good in this, is being really good in 2025 with these open topics, which help a lot for new ideas to come through and disruptive ideas. We still need to work harder on this. I have no doubt that we need to adapt. For example, one of Gregory's thoughts here would make smaller projects, faster ones, that will bring technology out as fast as possible and make sure that that cycle goes faster. But yes, there is a lot of work being done, and a lot of people who have the mindset of helping. So it's basically talk to each other, talk to other people who've already participated, and try to break down those barriers and make sure that you do know where you're going for and why you're doing it.
Thank you very much. And the last question I will take and answer that one, which is, what is the key factor to make Horizon Europe products available for LEAs? Why is there so little success stories? So one of the things I'd like to say in relation to that is that Europol are sharing success stories. But one of the things that we do have, I think, from the discussions that we've had today, is the fact that we don't want to just discuss and share the outputs. We want to also share the learning. So a lot of it is about understanding the problem. So we also need to be able to share that information as well. We'd very much like to see a new Cordis, a Cordis on steroids that is able to actually provide access to the outputs that are produced by projects. And that's not the outputs just being embedded within research reports, but actually being able to see what an output looks like. I think if you can't actually see what an output looks like, it's very difficult to make a judgment on whether it's of value or not. So I'd just like to say thank you to everybody today. We're near the end of our time, but in the spirit of today's theme, I'd like to suggest that innovation in security isn't defined by what's new, it's defined by what works. And for any solution to work, it must make sense to those who use it and to those affected by it. This means treating innovation as a shared practice, not merely a technical deliverable. It means recognizing that how we innovate, who gets to frame the problem, whose expertise is valued, and whose needs are prioritized, matters just as much as the outputs. So if any of these ideas resonate with you, I'd love to continue the conversation. Next Tuesday, the 1st of July, the Engage to Innovate project is hosting the Security Innovation Matters Symposium in Brussels. You might have seen some leaflets on your chairs. We'll be gathering practitioners, researchers, and policymakers to share ideas on what more human-centered, implementation-ready R&I ecosystem might look like. Keynote speakers include Nicholas Bezo and the Europol Innovation Lab. I know it's short notice, but I'd love it if you could join us. And I'd like to finish then and close by thanking my fellow panelists for such an insightful discussion today, and also to thank all of you for the questions that you posed to us. And finally, I'd like to thank the CERIS team for bringing us together and shaping such a timely and interesting panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Caroline and colleagues. This is the leaflet she was referring to, so just in case you see them around. Then a few communications. Now we have the lunch break. We reconvene at 2. And running in parallel, we have 2 demos, Euromars and FlexiCross demo area. And then the next item after the break is the fourth thematic panel on robust supply chain as backbone of the resilient European critical infrastructure. So see you later.